All right, it's 9 o'clock. Are you good, Diane? Should we get going?
Yeah, I'm
All
ready.
right. Well, we want to again welcome you here this morning. We just kind of want to gather together and just kind of talk through some things, and just to let you know that Diane and I don't have all the answers really. We're just in conversation, and so I hope that you see it that way. We're not necessarily experts, but we are really sharing what we're walking through in our ministries. Mine from the church side, Diane from the unique and individual side, and so just kind of sharing with you some of the things that we're learning along the way. So the questions that you ask are really good, and we enjoy kind of that dialogue. But glad that you are joining us this morning. Last week we kind of did a couple frameworks for discipleship, and I hope that as churches or whatever ministry that you're in, you have a framework for how you picture discipleship, how you can cast that vision. The Bible is fairly clear on some of the pieces of it. I don't think that, like, for in, out, and up is what Diane shared in my tree illustration that I shared. It's the same material. It's the same concept of what a disciple is. It's just a different picture of how it's presented and how we cast that vision for it. And so my first prayer for the churches is that they have a picture for what discipleship looks like in their church. Because once you have that picture, then you can start casting it, and people can have a clear vision of what you're trying to do in your church. And we know we're going to make disciples, but in that, I think there's a lot of Jesus made it very clear in some ways, but we have kind of muddied the waters in some ways. And so, if we don't have a clear picture of what Jesus is asking us to make in our people and how we're investing in our people, then we probably are muddying the waters for them of what they are called to do. And so what the tree for me does is it clarifies what we're trying to do. And really, if you look at it, everything that we do in our church should be centered around that tree of trying to do something in that one of those areas. And so, like, our small groups and our youth ministry all should be focused on the same thing of making disciples and making that tree. Or if you want to take Diane's, having everyone live out in, out, and up. It doesn't matter if you're in the children's ministry or in the youth ministry or in senior ministry. All the pieces, the how may look differently, but the what we're trying to create does not change by age or by really location, besides the picture. And so this morning, what we're doing is we're leaning into just one aspect of in, out, and up, or the tree, or maybe you have a different version of it at your church of how you cast it. And as I was talking to Diane, I think I hope this is a given. Like I hope this is something that we're all. It's almost like duh, yeah, that should be it. But one of the people that mentored me early on says always keep the main thing the main thing. And so you never stop talking about the main things. And so that's what we're talking about this morning is the main thing of the roots, of how we help our people really lean into Jesus Christ and growing in that relationship with him, and just some of those pieces. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pray, and I'm going to let Diane's going to share some of her personal experience and also some of the thoughts on that whole rooting thing. And then in the meantime, hopefully you'll ask some questions and we can kind of have a discussion that way. So let's pray first. Heavenly Father, we come before you. You are Almighty God. You are in control of all that is happening in our world. You're turning it for the good. And so we just want to root ourselves into you. We want you to be our leader. We want you to be the head of the church. We want to take direction from you. We want to root ourselves into you. We want you to help us bear fruit. And so, God, we just want to pour ourselves into you and just connect ourselves to you as best as we can. And so as we talk about this, may people have one idea or one thought that's from you. May you speak more than Diane and I, and may there be something that just clicks in a small way, or maybe a pivot in their ministry that they need to take, or maybe even an encouragement that they're heading the right direction. So whatever it is, God, may you speak through what is said, and may you bring encouragement and challenge along the way as we walk through this next few minutes. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks, Mike. So I'm going to share my screen and get to, let me see that it starts here at the beginning. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. I'm just going to leave it not in full screen mode here so I can see myself and mic like I'm talking to somebody. So I hope that's okay. Here we have the graphic of the roots, and our focus today is going to be on the roots and how allowing our roots to go deeper is the root, I guess you can say, of building a culture of disciple making. And so we're going to try to walk you through some pieces of what that actually looks like. And so roots that go deep is a necessary ingredient of a disciple making culture. So without deep roots, without really being deep, not just shallow, not just wide and shallow, but deep, are it's the starting place. And of course, as I've been saying every week, if you've been with us each time, that in this time of disruption, we've had to maybe adjust our place of where and how and when we go deep with our roots personally in our personal time with the Lord. There's been a lot of disruption in homes and in our workplace and so forth. So we've had to take that adjustment to a different level and find that investment of where to invest our time, how to invest our time. Later, I'll just talk briefly about the 5 capitals of how to invest time, energy, resources in order to have long-lasting fruit produced. But this is where we should be right now. And if we're not there, we need to get there, is pivoting from investment to engagement. Sorry, it's a little early for talking apparently this morning. So we should be engaging, one, with our own time, investment with the Lord, as well as walking down this road of growing our roots deeper with someone else or with a small group of people. And for many of us, that's our families, because that's who we're with pretty much all the time right now. So if you have the you have to have the right environment to grow and allow a seed to take root. And so it is the same for making disciples. It really does matter the environment in which you are in to create that space and time. That's personally as well as within the church design of how we go about doing church. You have to have the right environment for these things to really take root. I was reading this morning in my I have a group of ladies that I'll talk about in a little bit, because it was part of my discipleship journey that I ended up meeting with these ladies on a regular basis. And one of the things that we're going through right now, because many of them come from a Catholic background, and they are struggling to figure out how to grow roots deep. They have faith, they believe, that's not the question, it was how to grow. What's the next step? And so we're going through a book by Beth Jones called, I'll show it to you here. I know it's backwards, but getting a grip on the basics, right? By Beth Jones. And Todd and I had heard her speak on TV and on the Hillsong channel. We catch her once in a while, and she just really hits hard the basics of faith. But today I was reading specifically about the seed, right? In Luke 8:4-15, it talks about the seed, and that the seed must be planted in soil before it can grow. In the same way, the word of God needs to be planted into our hearts, into us, in order for us to grow spiritually, right? And then in Luke, it talks about the different ways that the seed gets either takes root or doesn't, right? So when the seed is thrown on the path, it gets trampled on, and birds come along and take that seed away. And basically in life, those are the people who hear the word of God, but maybe doubt or don't allow it to take root. And so the enemy gets a foothold there and steals that truth away from us. Likewise, on the rocky ground, the seed cannot grow on the rocky ground because there's not enough water to stay there and sustain the seed for growth. So it dries up and withers. Again, like those folks who receive the word but have no root for it to grow and bear fruit and come into full growth, right? When it's tested, when there's trials, when there are things that happen in life, the seed falls away and does not grow. Thorny ground, it gets choked out. So life's worries, strife, striving, things like that will choke out God's word, and we doubt and we don't believe the way that we should. And so then we have no way to grow mature. God's word says that trials will prove, is a testing ground to prove our faith so that we will be mature. And so finally, on the good soil, the seed grows 100 times more. It multiplies, it grows and bears fruit. For the noble and good-hearted person who perseveres in trials and retains the word of God and believes it and actually lives it out. But it's our responsibility to choose what's the environment in which we allowed seed to grow within us, the word of God to grow and take root and take hold, to become mature. And so at the bottom here of this slide, you see what really mobilizes discipleship is what fertilizes discipleship and helps it to grow is the texture of family. In other words, what Mike Green is saying here is in order to have a mobilization of disciples and a discipleship model, the fertile ground there is this family, right? This feeling of family and being connected to one another in real family, like in blood relatives, but also in church family, in people who you can walk this life, this tough road with. And so creating, like I've been talking about, a culture of discipleship begins with a balanced life. As Christ leads me up in my up relationship with the Father, I follow his lead. I lead myself and others in growing and allowing that root to take place. And then I can lead others in their discipleship walk. So I want to share, this is what I really am excited about sharing today. And I'll get to the slideshow here so you can see it full picture. Sorry, let's get to that quick. Here we go. Okay, so I was really struggling, I would guess, with exactly what to share today in terms of personal story. And I think that, you know, when you're talking about making disciples, that if you can't share personally how you're growing as a disciple, then it's really tough to lead others in becoming disciples themselves and disciple makers themselves. And so this rooted and deep roots in the tree that Mike shared last week has really stuck with me because it is a big part of my story. And I shared last week, if you were on the webinar, about a time when I went through a period of isolation. And it was what I can look at now as a forced sabbatical, that the Lord really did separate me for a period of time, a very long period of time. But I believe it was for this very purpose of growing my roots deep, that this time of solitude and reflection with the Lord allowed me to have a season of that fertile ground to grow and to take root, the words that he was showing me. And so like Jesus, who took time to go with his, alone, to speak with his Father and to get sort of the direction of the next step, I was spending a lot of time alone with the Father. And so one day I was sitting on my porch, and you can see in the background in my window behind me, that's my porch. And I spent a lot of days in the summertime during the season on my porch swing. and it was just me and my dog. So I would call this season of my life just me and Jesus and my dog Buddy. And we were just swinging on the porch, and I was bored out of my mind. And my highlight of the day was to go to the mailbox. And I would go to the mailbox because, you know, there was something to do, and I could look at the mail and maybe there was be something exciting in there. So let me get to this. So this particular day, I went to the mailbox, and I had been praying about what could I do in this season. I'm not an inactive person, so inactivity was driving me a little crazy, and I like to be creative. And so with a head injury, it's why I was home recovering. I couldn't do a lot of physical activity, and I couldn't drive really anywhere. So I was just sort of stuck in my house. So whatever I could do had to be right there in front of me. So I had been praying about that and went to the mailbox, and in the mailbox came the Guidepost magazine that my father-in-law so dearly gives a subscription to us every year. And I glance at it once in a while. I can't say I read it cover to cover all the time. But on this particular day, I thought, you know, I'm just going to flip through this and see if there's anything interesting. Well, the story goes that that day, the Lord answered my prayer in a mighty way, in a way that I never expected. And it goes back to this tree. And this article in Guidepost was about a man who had a head injury. Okay, of all things, that caught my attention. So here's a man who was in a car accident, who had a severe concussion, and by trade was a photographer, but could not carry his heavy equipment and was off work. He also couldn't drive like me, maybe just a short distance within a mile or so. And so he was just really beside himself, not knowing what to do. And his wife suggested, in her infinite wisdom, why don't you use your iPhone? That's not heavy. And he didn't realize the things that his iPhone camera could do until he started shooting pictures. And so within a mile of his house was this tree that you see in the picture here. And it was a bur oak tree. And so he started taking pictures of this tree and posting them on Facebook. And on the opposite side of this picture here is some responses he started getting from these pictures, because he kept going to this tree, taking these pictures day in and day out of different lightings and times of day and so forth. Well, people were reacting to this picture and his postings. And if you see where I have it marked here, it said, someone posted the verse, Psalm 1:3 beneath the photo. Blessed are they who delight in the law of the Lord, for they are like trees planted along the riverbank, bearing fruit in each season. Their leaves never wither, and they prosper in all they do. Well, this just struck me as just being one, an answer to prayer, and God did answer my prayer and gave me the idea to start painting and doing some things like that. But the part of the story I want to share today is that this tree, now this is the inside of the card. The very first picture I showed you was the outside of the card. That not only did I get this message from, I believe, the Lord in this article, I also got a card with the picture. I found these cards with these pictures of this tree on it that I had. I didn't know I had until I realized, wait, this looks really familiar. This can't be the same tree. Well, it was the same tree. It is the same tree, I believe, because the same scripture is on the inside of this card, Psalms 1:1-3. So since then, the tree has become very important to me in so many ways. And it's the tree with the roots that are showing. And the reason why the roots are so incredibly important here, like Mike said, the roots must go deep in order for the tree to grow strong and bear fruit. And I believe in that season, that time of trial and struggle, and God wanting me to persevere through it, just like in this time that we're in now, that perseverance is going to prove to bear fruit over time, right? It's that faithfulness. And so the tree in this picture just sticks with me as I needed to share that today. One, because the fruit still seems to be coming. One of the things that happened on Friday, I think it was, and I texted Mike right away because I'd been mulling over, he and I were talking, I think it was the day before, Thursday. Okay, we need to nail out our topic for Monday, and, what part of the discipleship process are we going to be talking about? And my sister texted me, well, Mike and I talked about, the roots and so forth, and we're going back and forth about what piece of this to nail down. And my sister texted me, hey, I have a serious question to ask you. And my sister is my younger sister. Out of 7, I shared with you how many are in my family. And out of 7, she's the youngest. And we all grew up Catholic, all grew up with the same parents, all grew up going to the same Catholic school, the same Catholic church. But yet we're all living very differently. And I'm not saying my faith is better than anybody else's. I just know that I've had a chance and I've had great teaching and great modeling going forward about how to grow deep roots. And so my sister asked me, how does one build their faith? I thought, wow, this is an unusual question from my sister to be asking me. How does one build their faith? And so I had to think about it, and I knew the answers, but I didn't want to overwhelm her and start rattling on about all kinds of things. So I was very careful about how I answered. It's not about religion. Being Catholic, I know that could have been a stumbling block and may be a stumbling block. It's about relationship. And it's about building a relationship with Jesus, with the Father. I know she believes. We've talked about this before. She's asked me questions over the years, but I know that she struggles with how to grow in that belief because she hasn't had someone to show her or a church family to show her. So effective discipleship builds the church. There's no other way around it. We have to build disciples to build the church, and it begins with us. It's not a task. We're not to think of discipleship as a task that we do. It's about our living it out as a way of who we are and what we are. It's not a class. It's not a program. It's not a curriculum. It's a way of life. And I believe because she has watched maybe, or she, especially here lately, we've been having lots of conversations about faith. Not necessarily the way that she posed that question, but just life with this COVID crisis. They own a deli in New Jersey. They're in the heart of where things are really bad there. And they're struggling to stay afloat. They're struggling to survive. It's just she and her husband running this deli pretty much 24/7 to keep their livelihood. And so I'm guessing that that's one of the reasons why she's struggling and wanting to know more. When people go through trials, they want to know how to build faith, or where does this faith come from? And they're going to look to people who are living that out. And if we as disciples aren't living it out, how will they know? No one accidentally creates disciples. Discipleship is an intentional pursuit that comes from Building a Discipling Culture by Mike Green. I believe this is so true. Back during that time, I told you I'd share about the ladies who I meet with on Monday nights. So back during that time that I was growing my roots deep and in a lot of time of solitude, a friend of mine was going through a cancer journey, and I had given her a book called Jesus Calling, and she's also from a Catholic background, and so prayer and reading the Bible was also new to her. She could pray the rote prayers she learned, and she had faith and she believed. She just didn't know how to build that faith. She didn't know how to grow in that faith. And when I gave her that book, which she carried with her to all of her appointments, to everywhere she goes, she came to me after that season was over, and we would pray together a lot. And she said to me, I want to be able to pray like you pray. I want to be able to be able to say those words that you say from the Bible. How do you do that? How do you get there? Basically, she was asking me, how do you grow? How do you grow your roots deep? And so we started a journey. I gave her a Bible, and this is kind of funny. And I told her about this routine that I have with the up relationship of my quiet time and reading the Bible. And so I gave her a Bible, and the Bible was a nice Bible, you know, as new Bibles are, but it was a pretty Bible. So it was for a woman. So I gave her a pretty Bible. And those females out there know what I'm talking about. So, but she wouldn't open the Bible. She wouldn't take it out of the box. It was too pretty. And I said, no, you have to open it. You have to use it. You have to, it's okay to mark it up. And if you're from a Catholic background, you don't do that. Your Bible sits on a bedside table, like my mom's family Bible did. And it just sat there. She didn't know what to do with it because no one really told her. But I shared with my friend, opened the Bible, and I gave her special marking by pens, and we started meeting. And I said, you can mark the things that we talk about in there, and I'm going to show you scripture. When we just started meeting at a coffee shop, and I would share with her how to read her Bible. She would stick the straw papers in there. She would mark it with napkins. She would have all these things all over her Bible. And she just, now she holds it up to her heart. And this is the transformation that's taken place, that I showed her this pattern of up with her quiet time in prayer, which she has been doing for a long time now. And her children are noticing, her husband's noticed, her mother, her sisters, her whole family has noticed this transformation in her. And they ask her questions. And her friends started asking questions. And so as I was pouring into her, other people started noticing and wanted to know what she had that was different. And so she started pouring into others. And then together, at some point, I forget where it was in the journey, maybe a year into it, she started saying, you know, maybe I'll have people over to my house. She has a winery in her beautiful home in the country, as well as a hair salon. Strange combination, but yes, both of them exist there. And so she started inviting some friends to her hair salon and asked me to lead a Bible study there to these and to show them what she has learned. And so that's been going on for probably 2 years now, that we have had this discipleship group, I guess. It's a small group that's starting to grow and grow out. So that's the out part. But right now we're going through this basics with understanding how to grow deep roots, and just to walk them through step by step what that looks like. And now we're seeing growth and fruit come from that, and it's really cool. So basically, I think I'm finished my slides. Here, I did want to share this. So Jesus had a rhythm, right? So he had a model for us to follow. He is our model to follow. And the disciples also followed his model of this prayer and obedience. They watched him and his ministry, that he went alone to pray, usually early in the morning. And so he made decisions based on what he was hearing from his Father. And that obedience did not always look like logical things that the world would think of as logic, and oftentimes it didn't make sense. And so often our act of obedience does not make sense with the world, right? Jesus does what he knows to do after hearing from the Father, and so must we. And sometimes the world will look at us and say that sounds a little crazy. He taught the disciples to do the same, and the disciples chose obedience over logic also. And so I encourage you to just step into this rhythm. For me, it's up in and out, but the tree and the roots really are very significant. Whatever works for you. In order to multiply missional leaders, we have to shape and multiply ourselves first. And we have to be people that other people will notice and want to ask those questions, like my sister and my friend. They notice something that I didn't even realize I was doing, how I was talking, and it became so natural to me because of what I was doing alone with the Lord. And it started to bear the fruit, and it started happening as a result of those deep roots. So I'm going to stop there. I've talked a lot for a while. It's time for Mike to share his portion of this, and then we'll get reactions.
So I'm more talking on the church side. So I think this rooting thing is kind of self-evident. I hope like it's the most important. So we would all say, I think we would all agree throughout, I would say every church, that this idea of rooting is the most critical thing. We look at John 15. All right, in John 15, Jesus clearly says, this is the last night of his life, that I'm the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me, you will bear much fruit. All right, that's a promise. That's a guarantee. If you remain, part one, you will bear fruit. All right, that's the other side of that was, if you do not remain in me, you can do. If apart from me, you can do absolutely nothing. All right, so that's kind of where the rooting at the baseline is. Like in our heads and our hearts, I think we all know it, and we need to solidify that the most important thing about discipleship is getting people rooted in Jesus Christ. I mean, there's nothing. They can do all the good things that they want to do, but if they're not rooted, it doesn't really matter. And so I say that because now the question becomes, how do I DNA that into our whole church? If that is really the truth, if that's really the fact that the most important thing we can do for our leadership teams and our elder teams and is rooting them, how do we DNA that? Because what we tend to do is, and this is where for a while, this is where I was as long as I preached it, we'd be good, right? And preaching it and sharing it from the pulpit is good, and we need to do that, but I think we need to DNA it into every aspect of our church and make it the most. Let me just explain that a little bit so you can see it from my end. Again, let me just say this. I don't do things perfectly, and I'm still learning, and so we're always trying to pick up little things that we can do. But for our leadership team, it's important that we make this idea of rooting the most important thing of our meeting. So we have an agenda. We all have agendas for our ad councils and leadership, but the agenda is secondary to our first part, which is really a question of we could change the question a little bit, but it's, what is God revealing to you? How is God speaking to you? What scripture is he using in your life right now? And just kind of like listening to each other. And sometimes it's, what is God revealing to you about the church right now? Or it can be, we have a decision to make, and rather than making it on wisdom, let's abide in Christ. Let's seek him for a month and come back and hear what he is saying. I have found that so we have people on our ad councils who are really wise people, really, really smart, business savvy. They lead, but this idea of wisdom versus faith is a struggle for them. And so I also know that in my ad councils, I'm discipling. I'm in my leadership teams, I'm trying to disciple them that, yes, we want to live by wisdom, but in the heart of wisdom is the fear of God and listening to God. And that if sometimes God asks us to step in non-wise places, it doesn't always make sense to us where he wants us to step, but I want to be teaching them how to listen. And so when we talk about roots, we talk about four things at our church, and it might be a little different for you. We talk about the Word of God. We want to be centered and kind of Psalm 1, just kind of rooting ourselves and meditating on his Word day and night. We want the Word of God to be centered. That's why we ask that question. What is God revealing to you in Scripture? What verses are standing out to you? Sometimes at the beginning of a season of ad council, I'll ask them what their life verse is, so I can kind of get a feel of who they are, and also some of them will say, I don't have a life verse. I'm like, well, you may want to find one. I think it's good to come back to and remember. So we do the Word of God. We do seeking God or prayer. All right. So what are we seeking God for? Listening. So what is God saying back to us as we're seeking him? and then obedience. How are we going to step in that direction? So if I DNA'd that into our ad council or our leadership team, is what we call it at our church, that needs to flow through it can't be just like a piece of it. It's got to flow through. It's got to be a major piece. So I'll give you some things that have happened along the way. I've had people, and again, when you have, I don't know how your councils work, but we have people who are busy on our council. We have people who are doing a lot of things. And so I'll ask them, what is God, what have you read lately? And I'll get this response sometimes. Well, I've been too busy. I haven't been able to do it. And so this is the one I try to act in grace a lot. This is where I try to be a little more truth. That's like, I love you, but I want you to know that the Bible says, apart from me, you can do nothing. Do you believe? And I'll try to challenge a little. Do you really believe that apart from you can do nothing? The most important thing you can do is spending time in His Word. Either you believe that or not? And does it make sense? If you make excuses for being busy, you're really saying that's not the most important thing about you. And so I kind of challenge our people that way of like, I hope in a loving way. I hope they experience it in love. Like, I'm not going to settle for excuses on this one. Because this is the most important thing you can do, and if you're not doing this, then the rest of it doesn't matter. That's how I basically explain it. All your other decisions, business-wise, family-wise, will not amount for much if you're not spending time in God's Word. The other side that I hear is, well, I'm just not very good journaling or doing it. And there's a book, I think it's a book called Sacred Pathways. Some of you may have heard of it. It's basically this this is the way I explain it in some of my classes that I teach. Every marriage looks differently. There are some people who are touchy-feely. They hold hands all the time. There are some relationships that banter, like they have this loving banter about them that's really funny, and you can just tell that they care for each other. Every relationship is different. So I say our relationships with Jesus Christ can look different in the way that we connect with Jesus. And so it doesn't always have to be like, Diane and I probably connect differently with Jesus in some ways. She may be more of a writer. I think she's more of a colored pencil, many different colors and lots of things, notes and that sort of thing. That may not be the way I connect with Jesus, but it doesn't mean that her way is right and my way is wrong. And I tell people this all the time. It's like, the one way that you're trying may not work. Don't be guilty about keep doing it that way. Find ways that work for you to connect with Jesus. Maybe it's going for a walk in the woods. Maybe that's how you seek Him. That's a sacred pathway. It's a creational way that you want to lean into. Maybe it's listening to worship music. Maybe that's a way you just kind of calm yourself and you find your quiet spot. And maybe it's listening to a sermon from somebody. We need to help people find what works for them and not really make them feel guilty for what not works for them. And I think I've had so many people who are walking around with guilt, and I try to say this is not about. I don't think Jesus is trying to make people feel guilty. He's trying to lead them to abundant life or fullness of life. And so we need to find the way that works. And so that's what we're trying to do. And so we also do this thing called One Word. Again, this is just a way for us to on-ramp on the beginning of the year to helping people live out that rootedness. And so One Word is this idea that God has a word chosen for people in our church. That He wants to teach them over the course of the next year. And so sometimes it's patience or solitude or quiet, and the words have a wide range of variety to them. But what we're trying to do is in the midst of them seeking the Word, I don't give them my word for them. They have to seek God. So it's a practice. And so that most people come into it say, I don't know if God speaks to me. God hasn't spoken to me. And I'm like, well, let's just give it a time. Let's try it with one word. All right. So what we try to do is help them walk through this idea of how God can open. And it's not like formulaic, as in there's not a like step A, B, C, and D. This is how Jesus does it. Because even as I've done it, my words have come to me all sorts of different ways, sometimes a month in advance, sometimes a month after we started it, sometimes in prayer, sometimes just in watching television. And I try to help people see that all you're doing is opening yourself to listen. It's almost the Samuel thing. Speak, Lord, for I'm listening. You know, like just stop and listen. And you don't have to be like 100% correct. Just write it. If you feel a word that punches you a little bit, write it down. And then you might have 5 or 6 words and see which ones echo. We talk about God echoes a lot and how we listen to God and God echoes. Like when you hear something and that sticks out to you and then you hear it again and again, that can be God echoing in your life. So, for instance, we hear this a lot, like they'll read something in Scripture, and then I'll teach on it the same week. And they're like, well, how is that possible? Or, do you know what's going on in my life? I'm like, I have no idea. In fact, I'm glad sometimes I don't know exactly what's going on in your life so that God can work this way so that you know it's him speaking. And so helping them listen to hear how God speaks. And that's true of our leadership. And again, DNAing it in our leadership team on down. I think it starts that level. If we don't talk about God echoes and what God's saying and disciple them through that, then it won't go through the rest of the church. Like we have to do this in our small groups, not just about going through curriculum of what book we're reading, but also we may not even get to the book and just say, what is God teaching you? And that might be the whole rabbit trail we go down. And it's okay because we're talking about where God is leading them and echoing in their life. Other things that we do on the leadership team is we take, and I hope that you all do this again. This is not new, but we set aside days of prayer and fasting. And sometimes we have specific questions we want our leadership asking and listening into. And sometimes it's just general to say, just listen and see what God says. And then we'll get back together and say, all right, what did God say? What is was he revealing to you? I don't want our vision or our drive to come fully from me. I want them to hear God and kind of, I believe that God will orchestrate it, that they all tie together in some way. And so we take days of prayer and fasting. And then when God speaks, and we are in agreement on that. So here's another one that I talk about, and I'm just giving you things all over the place a little bit. But when a husband and a wife are trying to make a big decision, when my wife and I are trying to make a big decision, I'll tell them, or Gina and I will say, let's separate. Not separate as in space, but let's not talk about that very topic for a week, and let's both pray about it. And when we get back together, if we're on the same page, God said the same thing to us, that's a go. If we are on different pages, that's a wait. And so because if we talk to each other along the way, we can form each other's thoughts, where if we separate and not talk about it that way and come back to it, we've allowed God to fully kind of engage our minds and kind of reveal. And so we do that with the leadership team. We're like, all right, if God is saying the same thing to all of us and we're all on the same page, as crazy as that may be sometimes, let's step. Let's go that direction. And I will probably say God's greatest moves are in those moments when we have listened and then stepped and then waited to see what he was going to do. I think God has a way of rewarding, and I think it's one of those, I'll put my finger up here. It's a cycle. The more we listen, the more we obey, the more we can hear him. And it's a great cycle of growth for our people. And so we do one word where we encourage people to listen, and then they step into that one word. And this is how we engage it in all the levels, is we have them use Google and kind of look up verses on that one word. All right, so start studying it, start breaking down the Greek word if there is a Greek word, and we'll help them kind of walk through that a little bit and just kind of teaching them the Word of God. The other thing that we do, again, I'm just DNAing it, giving you the church, the corporate side of things, is we have small groups that do a study on the story of God. So we try to help them understand what is from Genesis to Revelation, what is the story of God in the simple way, so that when they're reading David and Goliath, they know how it fits into the whole story of God. And you all probably know the whole brief words, but creation, fall, redemption, recreation is kind of the framework of that. But we kind of lead them through how each piece from the Tower of Babel all tie into that, from Satan and how that works, so that they have a framework for how the Word of God is set up, so that because the other pushback we get is, I don't understand it. Well, let's help you understand the framework, and then you can understand the pieces and also the questions that can lead into that. I'll give you one more thing. We do a few other things, but we are always on-ramping people to start reading the Word of God. By that, what I mean is we're looking for opportunities to kind of push that again and say, hey, if haven't started reading yet, read this. If you started reading it and you've fallen off, here's another on-ramp to get back on. And so we'll start new studies, like we're reading through John right now, and so we have a Facebook page that's just centered on that, so people can see what to read, some questions, and what people are saying about it. And we have other reading plans along the way that we call it on-ramping, because we're just looking for different spots where we can't just do it once a year in January, which is obviously one of the on-ramps, but there are other on-ramps along the way so that people who may not have been going to our church or have fallen off the ramp can get back on and say, hey, we're not guilting you. Again, I'm very trying to not be guilt-ridden in this, but be vision casting in this. We do this because we want you to bear fruit, and we think that God has incredible things for you. And the bigger the tree is going to be, the more the roots go down deep. If you're going to stand strong, we need to have strong roots. And so, again, I'm just giving you some of the corporate. There's a few other things, but why don't we just open it up for questions? Unless, Diane, do you want to follow up with anything on that?
The only thing I wanted to add that I mentioned earlier about the 5 capitals, that I would talk about that. What Mike's talking about in terms of people, especially the analogy of the businessmen, they understand investment. So look at investment of time. So the 5 capitals that we teach in Unique, it's one of the things that we go through, is also from Mike Green's Building a Disciple-Making Culture, is financial capital, spiritual capital, physical capital, intellectual capital. And so what we do is try to help people, if they're too busy, how to reinvest the capital that they have in their life. There's only so much time. There's only so many relationships that we can, have and build deeper. There's only so much finances and resources. So really helping people to put things in order of priority and prioritizing. So it's the understanding of where are we investing our time for the most return on that investment. And, from the spiritual aspect of it, of course, the most time we spend, investing in our relationship with the Father and in our relationship in discipling others, the more fruit is going to come. But that takes reordering our lives. And the stories that I shared really was a matter of my being available relationally, that I had to reprioritize my life in order to walk out in relationship, in discipling another person and in discipling others and myself. So if I didn't make that time available, those things wouldn't happen. So I think that's really important when we're teaching this to people, that they understand there's got to be some reallocation of our investment. If we're too busy, then what needs to be shifted in order to make that happen? So I just wanted to share that, Mike, specifically because I think it's a really good teaching point, especially for people who are serving in the church in leadership. If we're not setting the example first, then we can't be expecting others to be following. So that's
the other thing we started doing on a Sunday morning for our online services, and we'll be continuing to do it for a while. I think it's Mike Bream has those 2 questions that are pretty simple questions that you want people to walk away with. What is God saying to you, and what are you going to do with it? And so every Sunday for the last month, I think I've been asking people in the beginning of the message, say, all I want you to do is listen to what God's saying to you. It might be one thing, it might be in the worship time, or it might be in a prayer time, or it might be as you're skipping, going through scripture, and it might not have nothing to do with the message, but one thing that God's saying to you. And then the second part is the obedience side, is what are you going to do with it? And so I think those are 2 great questions for small groups, for worship, for just one-on-one, even just having sitting down for lunch, is what is God, like, it doesn't have to be something we've read together, but what is God saying to you, and what are you doing with it?
Yeah, we call that, I think he refers to that as the Kairos, the Kairos moment. What's God revealing? What are you going to do about it? So it's listening and following through. But anybody else have something to ask or comment on? We had something in the chat that Nick commented on. Holding people accountable reinforces the importance of living and not just learning Jesus. We need to live Jesus. So if you wanted to expand on that, it's not a matter of just knowledge and information.
Yeah, it's that holding people accountable without making the guilt part, because we've many of the people that I have come in my church, some of them Catholic backgrounds, have guilt that is just weighed on them, and and I think, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And so, I don't want their quiet times or their rootedness to come out of guilt. I want it to come out of vision for so accountability is saying, we want something better for you. We want to hold you accountable because God has plans for you, and that if you root yourself, you can start beginning experiencing them. So I guess it's that guilt. I don't want accountability to feel guilty necessarily. I mean, there might be a little bit of that in there, but I don't want it to be driven by guilt. I want it to be driven by, I want more of Jesus. I want to know him more. I want to experience what he has for me more, and that's what I want to drive it. But I think accountability. I think to call out on people's excuses, especially if you have a relationship with them and you have enough change in your pocket to do it. I think I think we.
Yeah. I think you brought out a good point when you said enough change in the pocket. So you've built a relationship with someone of trust that allows for that accountability to take place naturally. And so you can push a little bit without being heavy-handed and without the guilt because of the relationship that you've built with someone. And, again, that's a capital investment, right? That's an investment of relationship so that you can have that open door of having those heavy conversations with them. Or like in my case with my sister texting me last week, we have an investment of time and relationship that if we hadn't and we don't live in the same state. So this takes intentionality and phone calls and texting and having conversations when we can have them that are not just surfacey, that get below the surface so that there is open door for conversation to happen.
The other practice that we sometimes do in leadership, in some of our groups, whenever I want to break away and spend some time, Lectio Divina. We'll do a Lectio Divina every once in a while. We've had a snow day where we've had church, but we haven't had a whole lot. And I pivoted to a Lectio Divina, the interaction and people kind of just sitting in God's word and hearing it over. I think it's an excellent practice, and whether it's a leadership team or we could do a Higher Hope 101. I try to lead them through one of those because it helps them hear what other people are hearing, and so it's a great tool that I use, and I hope other people. I don't know if there's a resource exactly how to use it, but there's probably, if you looked up Lectio Divina, you might be able to find it.
That looks like, so you're really teaching them how to hear, and take that, what they've heard and what they're listening to, and walk it out in obedience. What does that look like on a Sunday morning, say when your numbers are lower? How do you do that, Mike?
We'll bring different readers. We've only done it once or twice. Again, it's on the really light, so I can't do it in a large group, but we'll have the reading. We'll have different people read, and then I'll have just a microphone where, again, it's large enough. Our room is large enough where we need a microphone. Just pass it around on what's a word. I think that's where we start. We read it 3 times. What's a word that's really sticking out to you in the passage or a phrase? And we'll have people share that, and then we'll read it 3 more times. And I'll say, visualize it. What are you seeing? What are you, the senses? How are you using your senses in this? Taste, sight, sound, pictures. What picture is Jesus revealing? Use your creativity in this section and try to really paint that. And then I'll walk it around. And then we'll read it a couple more times. And this one I probably won't have too much microphone, but say, what is God saying to do with this? So that's briefly how I have walked it with that. And that's how we walk it in youth ministry. We've done it with them and other places. I do it with my family sometimes too.
Yeah. I'm just thinking as you were talking, how cool now that, we're all struggling with how to get back into, meeting with each other in the churches. And at the beginning of the call, as we were waiting for people to come on the webinar, you and I were having this conversation about being small. Like everything's going to have to be in smaller numbers, but the beauty of that is you can do more of what you just described in this season as we prepare to re-enter into church, that you can do these very small, more intimate type of settings because we can't have a lot of people, or encourage people to follow this pattern in their own circles, right? In homes, with families, or maybe invite a couple people over that you're allowed to have, within the guidelines. But to have that talking about what is God saying, what are you seeing, what are you feeling? Yeah, Frank says, don't wait to be fed, pick up the spoon, right? We have to stop spoon feeding. We have to stop. We have to really help people to put it into practice themselves. I like that idea, Mike. I like it a lot. I think in this season, it'll be much more, it'll be a great season to go deeper with people. So not thinking big numbers and being concerned about meeting in large groups, but what can I do with the small groups that I am allowed to have? How would you respond to that?
I locked up a little there for a second. What's the question?
Well, I'm just saying to expand on how what you just described can be used in this season when we can meet in smaller groups.
Yeah, I think there's lots of tools. I would say Acts 2:42. I think that we can almost in this season pivot to smaller communities, and they actually may be more fulfilling and challenging and actually be a healthier version of the body than what was the church as a corporate worship service. So Diane asked me to share what we're putting into practice. We are doing some. Last Monday, I invited people. I cast vision for our church, and we can't do church the way you have always done church for the majority of people. We're going to do something different because we're forced to, which is nice for me because some of these changes I think I would have wanted to make, but I wouldn't have been able to make without being forced to do it. And so we're going to do, we call it a Simply Together. And so we're going to continue doing online, but in June, the first Sunday in June, we're going to launch small gatherings of 10 to 15 outside. They can do barbecues together, and they're going to basically ask them two questions. They can listen to the message, come back, eat together, pray pray for each other, and then ask the two questions: what is God saying to you, and what are you going to do with it? And just kind of start framing kind of that. And my excitement is that maybe some people who have never been into a church may join a barbecue to hang out with some people that they know. So that's kind of where we're pivoting toward, going smaller and allowing them to speak more and share more of what God's doing in their life. So I'm really hopefully that it's more Acts 2:42 than what we do now in some ways. The eating together especially. And there's I go back to that eating together. I think there's something special about relationships that eat together. I just think there's some intimacy that God designed in us that meals kind of produce. And so I'm really excited about adding that piece into those communities, because I think those relationships will go so much deeper around a meal, and then just spiritually as well.
Well, it's biblical.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's excellent in terms of just thinking through what you can do. And with it being summer months and it'll be warm out, I think it's a great time to think outside the box of, and literally outside the walls of what you can do relationally. I just got a picture in my mind as you were talking of, just small groups meeting outside. If you have a lot of property, I know some of our churches have a lot of property, and meet in small groups having picnics on the hillside, right? Like Jesus did. He was teaching outside, and they gathered in groups, probably many family groups, and in small groups on the hillsides, listening to him, but also probably sharing with each other what they heard, much like Mike described. So capitalize on what you have and the time that you have, and where, what has God put in your hands and where you are. If you're landlocked, that's a different kind of concept of where can we meet. So encourage people to meet in homes, give them the tools they need to walk through a very simple, keep it simple, like Mike said, keep the framework simple that you can hand it to, say, a mom or a dad or somebody to walk through their own family, but can invite neighbors. So it's invitational as well.
Right.
Yeah. Anything else that you would add?
I would just say this discipleship, the rooting it should be the majority of our time in some ways, because if they're not rooted, none of the rest of it doesn't matter. Like, if you're rooted, he will change us and he will develop healing in our soul. He'll He will do what he wants. He'll produce the change that we all desire for ourselves. Our relationships become healthy because of rooting. Our calling is clear because of rooting. And so the question then becomes, how do you, I'm guessing the majority of people are in a church context, but it might be a family or whatever. How do you, the DNA part of it is such a critical piece to it. It's not just something we talk about. It's something that we have to DNA into our families and our bodies and our church. And so that's the question. It may not be the same way I do it, but the DNA, I just think it's something we need to constantly think through, is how do we keep putting this as the center part of all that we do. So just having that process through, is this part of our DNA? I mean, yes, we believe this. Yes, there's nothing super new here, but is this really, is this really how we're living it out, and how do we make it more real for our people?
Exactly. Yeah. Living it. You got to live it. So, I know we have some announcements. If there are no other comments or questions, we can move to announcements. Just want to remind people the unique grant is still available. They're not all used up yet. So first come, first serve. They're awarded as they come in and are approved. So please take that opportunity to walk your church through and your church leadership through what is a disciple making process. It is not a program, it is a process of discipleship. So there were some other ones, Mike. Do you remember?
Yeah, new time with Nick today and Thursday. And so keep that on your radar. I think the links are there either on the website, or you get a lot of emails. You get some emails with that link in there. And you also, just so you know, if you miss any of these, Colleen does a great job of putting them on the YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to. All the noontime calls are there. All the Monday and Tuesday Zoom calls are there. So feel free to watch them later. And also, Rich and Chuck will be tomorrow at 10 with a few other pastors, just talking about how they're walking through the virus. And so you're welcome to join them. But I think that's all I have on that.
I'm here. And it's 2 minutes after 10. So I guess we'll call it a day.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.